First of all, again, I want to thank you all for being here. My role is to facilitate a discussion about what you have learned today and what you might be taking home with you today, and most importantly, what action you might be taking as a result of what you learned today. So we're going to facilitate a discussion about that, first at your tables, and then once the tables have had a chance to talk, we're going to ask your table facilitators to then share what they heard at the tables. So first of all, for you facilitators, and I hope you know who you are, inside your grove of trees, if you haven't discovered it yet, are these green forms. These green forms contain the key questions that we want to ask every participant here today to think about and to write your impressions about so that we can benefit from your wisdom and your thoughts. So the three questions, they're written down here, but I will just read them out loud. First, what are the important things you've heard today that affect you, your interests, your work? This might be research you're doing or volunteer work you're doing or planning work you do. This could be in whatever walk of life you occupy and whatever way you came here today. We're curious to know what are the things today that you heard that affect you. We also really want to understand what you will do or what you might do differently based on what you heard today. Maybe you heard somebody say something about, as I did, the retention of information that occurs in classrooms that look out onto green spaces. Well, I'm inspired by that to go and help green high school campuses because my kids are in high school. But maybe you had some other thing that was impressive to you. We want to hear about that. And then the last question, which is, what would you like the Sacramento Tree Foundation to follow up with you about? Is there some piece of information or some expert or some way we can connect you to somebody or something that would help you translate your action into real action? So we want you to take 3 to 5 minutes right now to write down your answers to these questions. After that 3 to 5 minutes, I'm going to ask the facilitators then to facilitate a discussion, first by, once again, making sure you all introduce yourselves, and then to go around and hear from each of you what you wrote down. And then in about 20 minutes to 30 minutes, I'll come back and we'll ask you to share out as a table. But there will be time here for you, once you talk about it individually, for you then to have a full table discussion about your individual impressions and your actions that you might take. So with that, let me just ask you to start writing if you haven't done so already. I'm going to call time in about 3 to 5 minutes, and that will be the point where we ask the facilitators to introduce themselves and to introduce the next part of the exercise. So once everybody at your table has finished writing, facilitators, this is your chance to initiate the conversation at your tables, make sure everybody knows everyone, and then go around and ask each person to take 1 or 2 minutes to share their thoughts. And now you can erupt into a full table discussion on whatever issues you wish. I'll give you about 10 or 15 minutes for that full table discussion. I'm going to give each table about 5 more minutes to talk. Facilitators, you should be thinking about what you're going to say when I call on you. If you have something to share from your table, or if somebody from your table has something fascinating to share with us. So start to think about what you want to make common to the full group here. So about 5 more minutes at around 3:30. Okay. Is everybody ready to do this big group discussion now? I think the way we want to work this is I'm going to ask the facilitators to raise your hands if you have something you'd like to share. Now, I'm hoping that we get a lot of stuff here, so if you've raised your hand and I've called on you and we've done a few more people, and you want to raise your hand again, that's fine. We'd be happy to hear from you multiple times. If you want to hand the microphone to somebody at your table to talk a little bit more in detail about the thing that you heard, that would be fine too. So is there somebody at table that would like to start with the sharing? I see table 3, Ann Fankner.
My table was on fire. What set the fire was all this wonderful data and information this morning. Actually, I want to pass the microphone over to, really what matters is where the rubber meets the road, right? Right? We actually need an environmental phrase for that. Get away from the petrol. But I'd like to pass the microphone over to Daniela, who is an instructor at Grant High, and then I'd like her to share the microphone with Tatiana, who's a student at Grant High School.
Great.
The Geoenvironmental Science and Design Academy over at Grant High School, like 15 minutes down the road from us. My landscape architects just finished planting 100 trees with the Sacramento Tree Foundation on campus. As an extension from the Pacer Promenade that was funded thanks to Sacramento Tree Foundation and the Urban Greening Grant through the Strategic Growth Council. We partnered up 2 years ago. We got $1 million, close to $1 million, $990,000. But I always tell the students we're millionaires, say $1 million. Part of that, it's been our mission with the Sacramento Tree Foundation to have Grant High School and the Pacer Promenade. It's right at the heart of the campus to be a demonstration garden for the community, for the students, and we were having a discussion at the table how the next step would be data collection, how effective the Urban Greening Grant project is for the community. So an invitation that we want to extend to everybody here is to come out and visit us, see what we're doing, and use. That was not me. What? Oh, I'm on fire. What did I do? I'm electrical. And use it as a research site, a demonstration site. So what's the next step? It says a research site. So invitation to come and hang out with us at Grant High School.
That's great.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll come back to you. Okay, one more person? Sure.
Hello, everyone. My name is Tatiana Johnson, and I'm a senior in the Grant Geo Environmental Science and Design Academy. And a few important things that will stick with me today is the effect of trees on student learning and concentration, and how trees can positively affect pregnant women, and how vital trees can be in creating a safe and comfortable environment for those of all types of socioeconomic backgrounds. And I will definitely research differently for my senior research paper. My research paper is about high incarceration rates of colored people and the linkage to socioeconomic status. And a lot of this data that I've seen today and a lot of the presentations will really help me understand how actually our urban jungles can really affect how people live their lives and what type of roads that they take. And
You come to college at the University of Illinois, right?
Maybe. Scholarship? Maybe?
Out of the state of California.
It's trying to take me away from you guys. But yeah, something that I really will be taking with me from today into tomorrow and to my whole life is the fact that trees are really the start of something so huge. And especially for someone like me who comes from a lower income area who does not have a lot of trees or a lot of nice green spaces to go, it's nice to know that there's some way to help cure this type of problem that I live with. And I was recently diagnosed with an anxiety disorder living in the situation that I live in, and this helped me open doors on how, on a personal level and also on a global level, how trees can really affect and change lives. I know that sounds crazy that it's just a tree, but I mean, the data shows and it tells us that this is really important and it's the start of something really big. And I'm definitely going to be citing some of these doctors in my research paper, so if you guys want a copy of it, I'll...
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really great. Really appreciate it. William.
So our table was on fire, even more on fire than table 3, honestly. And so we came up with 4 main points, and I really pushed our table to choose the top. So I'm going to run through the losers real quickly. So we talked about advocacy, not that these are losers, just I suggested we choose a winner. So we talked about advocacy, education, and activism with the elected officials and with the developers, and infiltrate the developers was our terminology. So we're all behind that. Forming partnerships with urban agriculture, with Walk Sacramento, with the biking community, strengthen those that we already have. And then we had a robust discussion of the drought, whether that should affect our planning for this year, whether we should really cut back on planting the trees and use that water to preserve the urban canopy. And I can say that we are in violent disagreement on how to proceed on that. So we're going to kick that to other people. But the winner was planning, because we felt as a table that a lot of the issues that we face now could be faced in a productive way by participating in the Sacramento County General Plan, the 2032 General Plan, being active in specific plans when they start to be proposed again as development picks up. And also a suggestion was to have actually an urban forest plan. Look at the urban forest as a 20-year planning project, just like we do the general plan for land use. Thank you.
Good. Great. Thank you, William. Is there another table that wants to share? I see over here, Kelly.
But I had the distinct pleasure of sitting at a table with 4 planners from the Sacramento County Planning and Environmental Review. So to address William's table, we talked about upstreaming in health policies and upstreaming in health care. So we took that concept to planning. These are staff members that are in charge of the planning documents and the planning of our communities, but those things that they have to approve are passed down to them. So they wanted to give a big round of applause to all of the elected officials and all of the policymakers that did attend today, that are very forward-thinking and progressive and want to incorporate these things into our communities. And they would like to...
Can we just do that right now? Let's do that.
Yes, absolutely. And they would like to extend the invitation to even more policymakers to make sure that the things that they are reviewing are in line with the wonderful research and benefits that we've discussed here today.
Great, thank you. John.
Okay, our table wasn't necessarily on fire. We were more like comfortably in a hot tub, So one of the things that was moving about data, and data doesn't necessarily move you unless you really intuit what the outcomes are of that data. But we particularly were moved by Bill Sullivan's data research that tied the outcomes of our kids in school with green, and that was really profound. And I think we all shared that. There's a lot of all of us have stories around what that means, and for all of the takeaways for us are really our ability to go to the schools that we interact with and influence the outcomes of that. I think that, and Linda Budge at our table had also, the City of Rancho Cordova has an interesting thing. They situate parks next to schools, and there's this interplay where the kids can have some learning about plants in the parks, right? And also there's a large multi-ethnic group in Rancho Cordova where they speak 84 languages. So there's a lot of kind of community building that can happen around schools. So we want to thank those who did all the research and Dr. Sullivan for that kind of stuff. And so that was those are the takeaways.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. Della.
I think just the deepening idea about trees and public health. You know, we covered this topic last year, and so to come back to it this year and to have more data, it just, you keep thinking, wow, this stuff really connects and it really matters. The second thing was something that comes up once in a while that just has to do with thinking about Sacramento historically. As Eric used to say, and as Ray has said, used to come over the hills, and what did you see? Grasslands and flooded plains. And this is a man-planted environment, which is very different than the East Coast. And it's full of intention, and it needs to be taken care of, and just the importance of that. The third idea was taking control of the narrative as we move forward. That trees are really a mandate, and that they are part of the public health infrastructure and not really optional and not really a luxury. And then the fourth idea is extending that into the community and into young people so that we get it out there early and often, and they grow up kind of expecting trees to be what is. And Jeannie's going to add.
The trees are no longer a luxury. That we have to make sure our languaging is making it a mandate. And that mandate is not just in our schools or in our local communities, but nationally and internationally. And our Earth is at a place in crisis with global climate change, and that maybe it needs to be a United Nations mandate to connect trees and health. The second thing, if I may, business guru Jim Collins has this expression, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal? And one big, hairy, audacious goal I would like to put forward would be that the relationship with trees and health in the history of humankind could not be written without including this Greenprint Summit and the actions following it.
One of the points made was that while people have an intuitive feeling about the importance of trees and green in their environment, having the data, having the information gives one the power to translate that at different levels, whether it's at the individual community or in terms of policymakers. So there was a thank you and a request for more information from the Tree Foundation. The message that came across loud and clear was that policy needed to be directed towards prevention rather than reactionary. And that was also a very loud, important message that came through in terms of both public health and community awareness and community action. And finally, the idea of promoting health versus treating illness, that is really central to this. But many of the actions that one might take in the near term and long term to prevent and promote health also promotes healing in the near term. And finally, the ideas that integrating top-down, bottom-up policy and action is really an essential approach. Neither one level in itself cannot solve the problem.
There really was a feeling that if change with trees and health is going to be sustainable, that it really has to involve school-age children, K-12, K-8. And the example that came up with our table was a real feeling that that's a lot of what drove recycling, was when parents had to face their kids at the table, or when kids said, let's recycle. So I think if there's a big part of the change, certainly school-age kids have to be part of it. A second was that everybody at our table really loved the data this year. Bill, Jeff, Cindy, and everybody else. So everybody at our table would also love to approach that information in a tactile way, to have a handout or to be directed to a website, and I suspect you'll be doing that, if not by the end of the day, later on anyway. But it was a feeling that it wasn't just drive-by on the data, that they wanted to touch it, learn it, live with it, and I think that's really, really cool. A third was that, very much like Robert Phillips said, that it's great to meet in a room like this and to discuss what ought to happen in individual cities out across the region or the state. But it's also really great to build in an acknowledgement that you need to go to a specific neighborhood and talk to specific people and listen really hard and build what they want from the way up. And if it's sustainable, it really has to happen with that. And the last thing was a really candid admission that talking about trees and tree canopies is a hard discussion. And it involves some very difficult economic trade-offs, not the least of which is sometimes when neighborhoods have more trees, they become more beautiful, they become economically stronger, gentrification takes place, taxes are higher, and there's a real question about a trade-off about whether, as you move the trees up, if you move residents out, that really has to be part of the discussion.
Yeah, that's a great point.
We were just blown away by the data. I mean, the data, some of it very complex and some of it very simple, which we knew in our guts. But it was also commented that we saw more data than we've seen in the past at these. And so all of us were excited to see what's happening in the research and knowing that it's a developing field and can't wait to see the kind of data that we see, that we're going to see next time. And then also an excitement to hope that we see that data actually making changes on the ground with some of the things that we saw here today. One of the ideas that was brought up by one of our members, which I think is just such a neat idea, was we have a few elected officials here, and again, we commend them for taking the time to show up here all day. But there are a lot of who aren't, the people who make policy and the people who carry that policy forward. The idea is to take this Greenprint Summit and to boil it down into an abbreviated presentation and approach the various city councils and boards and give a small presentation to try and take some of the excitement that we feel here today and bring that to the folks that will actually make some of the change happen.
I'm going to jump off something this gentleman over here said about bringing it to the kids. I am the proud mom of a 6-year-old who has spent the last 2 days telling me how often to flush our toilet and how long to turn the water on while washing his hands, things he's bringing home from kindergarten. The one step that his teacher didn't mention when she said only rinse your hands for 10 seconds was to make sure you get the soap off. So needless to say, he rubbed his eyes, and that caused a whole nother conversation about water usage. So I do think it's important that we involve our kids because they're going to bring that message home. So I think our table was really focused on a couple ideas. The first being the importance of the story that came up today. And we talked about how we all do need to take that moment and refine our story, not only from an emotional perspective, but also from an evidence-based perspective, which the research did help us with today. And then we had a long discussion also about the importance of continuing to support research, that funding for research is not, it's one of those first things that gets cut when budgets get tight. And that's something that's very important because there's never going to be an end to the information that we need to make these things happen. So advocating for continued research, refining your story, and then another thing that we felt was important for both looking at the research and also making implementation and making change was the importance of collaboration and bringing different perspectives to the table.
With some smaller nonprofits represented at the table, that being able to partner with someone like the Tree Foundation and share information, because getting information out to more people is really critical, and the Sacramento Tree Foundation has more resources than some of these smaller groups, so how can we partner together? And with that, along the same theme, that there's so many people out there who need to know more, and if they know more, then when we're planting these trees, they'll be better cared for, and then they'll live longer, and that's critical. And I think the fun piece to go along with that is kind of a public relations campaign for trees, and an idea that I think Tina is going to talk about.
Yeah, we weren't on fire because we think things are still a little too dry for that, but we were exploding with passion over here. So again, we do think the data is really important, but we also think that getting that data out, communication is really the key to all this research, is getting that out to people. And perhaps more important than planting more trees is to impassion people to be more advocate for the urban forests that they already have. And so we talked about ways to do that, and one of the ways we discussed to do that was to develop some interactive apps to generate that advocacy in your community, to get people out, maybe walking around the neighborhood and having their iPhone tell them about the trees in the neighborhood, what kind of tree it is, what kind of benefits that tree is giving, and also how many calories they burned while they're walking. Something, because that's what people like. You know, they like to be involved and they like to be doing something active with their children and learning at the same time.
Was sitting with a table of arborists, and when I joined the table to facilitate, it was pretty clear to me that the conversation had been going on for a while. And I don't want to say that it was a heated discussion, but I did have to call John Melvin from CAL FIRE to come in and get things under control. What I heard was really a general expression of some frustration that we have a lot of discussion about the need to be planting more trees, but we still have way too high a mortality rate for new trees, and we've got to do something to address that. And the urban forest industry could and really should be a part of that solution. So we talked a lot about what role arborists could and should be playing. And what I was hearing was really a need for that industry to become more involved in mainstream kinds of discussions. Follow the money was a term I used, not from them. But really, those discussions, such as health-related, wealth-related, things that we heard today, really are the beginning of a very positive discussion about the value of urban forests, the value of trees, and of course, along with that, the value of properly planting, maintaining, and monitoring the health of those trees. So that's really the takeaway we took.
I was fortunate to sit at a table with a lot of practitioners, people who work in our urban forest every day, and their comments were very practical. And I'd like to ask Gordon Mann and Joe Benassini to share their comments about design requirements and sharing a common language.
Well, we agreed that you can't fix bad design, you have to change it. And we look at a lot of projects, and a lot of the urban foresters are considered the obstructionists in city government. The planners and engineers look at us like we have the big crosses out trying to stop all these projects. And it's because the designs are so bad and we're brought in so late that we couldn't sleep at night if we let the project go through without the comments on what has to happen to change it. And so we need to get brought into the process earlier, before the landscape architects draw and ask us for review, before even people that put stuff on the plans the first time. They have to look at existing trees and see what's there, and they need to understand what the needs of the trees are in the design so they can come forward with a good design. And then a lot of the talk is that there's not enough money for maintenance. Well, when you're spending millions of dollars fixing crap, there's no money for maintenance. If you put it right the first time, there's plenty of money for maintenance. So if we can get these designs set up, then we have the opportunity to have a more balanced budget.
My insight into this, having worked on both sides of the fence, is that there aren't a lot of disciplines out there that are going to learn to speak our language. We talk a lot about cross-sectional relationships and partnerships, but it's really up to us to learn to speak their language. We need to learn to speak engineering. We need to learn to speak health. We need to learn to speak architecture. That's how we engage people. We need them on our side, but we need them to come to us on their terms. And I think that makes a big difference. These relationships are built slowly. Who's missing in this room? What discipline is missing in this room with a couple of exceptions?
I want to pass the microphone over to Monica Hernandez from SACOG. She wrote on the front and the entire back of her form, and we are super inspired by her words, and it was a great group in general too, I want to say. So thank you guys.
Sure. Hello. Those of you who know me know that I'm not known for brevity, so I apologize. I'm staff at the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. We work in the 6-county region, the same as the Tree Foundation. We are not a government agency, but we work with all of our local governments through a joint powers agreement. And we do our best to bring the best information and data to our board members so that they can make their most informed decision at the local level. So I won't read my whole thesis, but some of my takeaways are to better leverage my contacts at the Sacramento Tree Foundation when I'm working in the community. I work in our agricultural portfolio, and I also work in our low-income communities on transit-oriented development, and I also work with Design for Active Sacramento. I'm one of the founding members. And one of the barriers to walking, biking, and using transit in our lower-income communities is the facilities. And there is a huge deficit of shade. So we have heat islands, and it's disparate in some of our communities. So how do we address those issues? How do we make those improvements? And our current water situation withstanding, I think there is an opportunity to leverage all of our resources to identify these communities and increase the opportunity for physical activity, which would then reduce our incidences of chronic disease, cardiovascular disease, obesity, which also in our 6-county region affect our lower income communities at the highest rates. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
So I'm curious
what I wrote.
What did you write down as something you would take home personally as an action, Monica? Just to
Okay, so me personally, outside of my role at SACOG and prior to me getting this awesome job at SACOG, I taught elementary school for 10 years. And I would try to get my class outside into the playground that had no shade, but it was still outside and it was better than the mobile room that I was in, or to be able to walk down to the park for a class lesson. And that was actually difficult, to be able to go off campus to a local park. So getting trees onto school campuses, but actually getting fruit trees to maybe get a dual purpose. And fruit trees on a campus are not gonna address our food access issues in a community, but they're gonna help. And they're gonna introduce kids to what might be, in some communities, their only piece of fresh fruit that they can get. So that really resonated, because I didn't have the data, but I had the observed behaviors of students outside.
So as you know, I live in Bakersfield, right? And I also had the pleasure of having lunch with Ray Trethewey today. So this is almost cheating now. I'm going to take this information that I've learned and some of the information I learned last year, and I'm going to start nibbling at the heels of our city council. As a citizen, not as a person who works for Davey, not as a tree expert, but as a citizen, to say, look, our very lives depend on this. You want people to stay in this town, you want people to live in this town, you want us to be a part of this town, then make it a better place to live.
Okay, Joe Benassini and I are going to work together on trying to utilize LiDAR in our communities. That's
Cindy
it.
Blaine, she inspired us all today, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah.
I happen to deal with the Health Effects Task Force of Breathe California, and we've collaborated with the Tree Foundation. So together we have a number of opportunities where we can go before the Sacramento Air Quality Management District and other policy areas that we can use this information. The other part that I think is really important, as you come to summits like this, you begin to connect with people that you didn't know before. So things like the, what was the name of that? The food core. The food core is another possibility of connection with master gardeners in schools, where you connect all of these things together and start building from a community base. And I really think the community base builds the momentum that policymakers pay attention to.
I, thanks to CAL FIRE, have been able to complete large-scale tree inventories in park districts in Sacramento County, and am moving on to urban forest master planning thanks to CAL FIRE for those same park districts in Sacramento County. And in addition to correcting the technical tree problems in our urban forest master plans and addressing the needs and values of our communities within our available budget, what we learned today is that we need to consider public-private partnerships and potentially have our park district acting as regional government, local regional government, moving into private land for tree maintenance and tree care and technical tree information, and also including, instead of ecosystem service benefit, really identifying the link between a healthier community and more green spaces available in seriously economically disadvantaged neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, everybody, for your thoughts and your willingness to be a part of this exercise.